Is it my turn?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so I guess this is we're into the intralocution. I'm not gonna do a big speech anymore. I'd rather just like have back and forth now, if that's okay.
Okay.
Um, okay, so the problem that I have is that the origin of the debate, just to bring back the actual topic, was subjective moral relativism versus absolute universal morality, right? So
Mhm.
essentially, the problem I have is that I would say appeals to the ancients is also an appeal to an authority figure. And I never said that we should dispense with them. In fact, I already made the argument that Nietzsche is appealing to an even earlier paradigm than the paradigm that goes all the way back, like the paradigm before Christianity, essentially. Like the
Mhm.
Homeric paradigm of the hero, of the man of might. From the Bible, I think they were referred to as the heroes of renown. And
Yeah.
I think that that was referring to like people like Hercules, Achilles, people that literally were like half god, half human at a certain level. And these people, these colossi were bestriding the world at this particular moment. And I would put Napoleon in that category, perhaps I would put Julius Caesar. Like there's a lot of other characters like that who I would say did really affect the world and change the world for the better to a certain degree. Like they they were able to create, like you said, to create their own reality by just forcing the world to adhere to their particular moral standards. And I would argue that the reason that it works for these people is because their will reflects that universal morality. That's that when people talk about alignment, moral alignment, spiritual alignment, their political alignment, even what they're talking about is being aligned with the specific values of the universe. So stoicism would say like that being living in accordance with nature is one of its prerequisites for practicing a stoic life. And if that's the case, then being living in accordance with nature would be like living um within the scope of the things that adhere to the best possible choices to maximize the capacity of that entity. And I think that there is a way that you could act that could be self-destructive, and that would be more herd mentality. But then those people who rise above the current of the herd are the ones who, and that's because they have the will to power, not the true will. Because I think the problem is what the true will is appealing to. The true will is appealing to something outside of humanity, and the will to power is something that's deeply ingrained in us on a biological level that Darwinian survival of the fittest seems to also emulate as well. So when we're looking for truth, we're looking for things that can be empirically verifiable by multiple sources, independent sources. And so I would say that although Nietzsche and Darwin would have completely disagreed with each other, the only reason why I'm able to use them together in this capacity to dispel the argument of moral relativism so easily is because moral relativism is the morality of the herd. The herd wants moral relativism because it's conducive to weakness, right? If there's no master and herd, then all the herd sheep people think the NPCs all think that they're kings. You get what I'm saying? So it's like instead of recognizing that there are certain great people and that some of us, like, I don't think that I'm ever going to be like any of those people, those great people out of history. But I think that the fact that those people exist demonstrates that um, some people that stand above the rest of us, and they don't stand above the rest of us because of they're part of the herd and because they think everybody is a special spiritual snowflake star seed. It's because those people went above and beyond to maximize their potential and to demonstrate the will to power.
Huh. Um. Yeah. As far as all of that, I'm a little bit lost on it. Let me think here. So you're talking about will to power. You're talking about how moral relativism is for the herd. Um, hmm.
Yeah,
I guess I'm.
because it makes no delineation. It makes no delineation between it's pretending as if it's basically like forced like spiritual communism. Like everybody is forced to believe that they're all the same or whatever, and that sounds like the herd to me. That sounds like the herd speaking, right?
Yeah.
Like we're
Okay.
all special snowflakes essentially, right? And it's like, no, we're not all special snowflakes. And some people are just better than other people, and that's just how it is. And that's how the ancient world was before Christianity. So actually, your appeal is actually an appeal to the herd mentality, which is basically saying that everyone's a special star seed, and that's why it appeals to like the modern zeitgeist essentially, because everyone wants to be a special star seed snowflake these days, and it's essentially like spiritual wokeism in spiritual communism where everyone wants to believe that stuff, and it's because it appeals to the masses, it appeals to the plebs, and that's the difference between, like, if you think about the morality of the ancient world, like there were masters and there were slaves, right? There were great men and women out of history, and there were people trapped by their circumstances.
See,
Would you agree with that?
this is something funny because this is something I do disagree with the well, with some elements of the new age. New age is a huge mixed bag, but yeah, in general there's this idea that like, or kind of these ideas that we're all special or equal. I would say not at all. Like even I find, which I'm just going to say this is a beginning thing to give some taste of my way of seeing it. Like with races, one race to another, okay, one better than the other, I don't know, but like they have a different internal energy. So to say that we're all the same, I think a lot of times tries to erase the what the internalness of, a different ethnicity or whatever actually is. I find that hugely problematic, and that's a huge problem in my mind in the spiritual community. So that's a totally tangential thing, but I think it gives a taste for the sort of the next thing I'm gonna say. Yeah, I would follow the ancient view of it, that like some people are just better than others. I do think
And
that a
that's
large
okay, and that's totally okay, right? Like there's no problem with that. And the moral relativism, so you basically dispensed with your own moral relativism then, I guess. Because
not
you
really.
literally just made an appeal to, no, because you just made an appeal to standards. You just agreed that some people are just better than others, and that's just how it is, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean that we have. I believe that we all have like a share of like whatever. I believe that a soul is a potential, right? So I'm using Nietzsche to destroy this argument, but this is not my personal argument. This is like me using Nietzsche and Darwin to show you that the holes in the moral relativist camp are like actually really big, because I don't even need to appeal to the ancients. I can appeal to the moderns to destroy the postmodernists, because moral relativism is essentially a belief that there is no truth and there is no good. And that means that there's also no people are better than other people, that we're all just whatever. We're all just blank slates. We're all just the tabula rasa. Remember, like I said yesterday. And I think that that is kind of what that is arguing. And I don't agree with that.
I don't believe.
I think some people have a great capacity and some people have less capacity, and that's okay. It doesn't make anyone less human than anyone else. It doesn't mean anyone's less deserving of rights or protections or freedoms or equal opportunities or anything like that. But equal opportunity also means opportunity for some people to fail, and that there have to be standards, and that there has to be some kind of like, essentially these great people are the ones that forge the moral standards through to the future. And if we try and suppress those people and say, well, that's just your opinion, every single time someone tries to set a standard, then we'll never be able to tell who is part of the herd and who's a master. And that sounds like the herd mentality. As soon as you say
Um,
everyone is the same, that's the herd. Right.
yeah.
As soon as you admit, actually, there's people who are better than me. Actually, there's people who are way smarter than me, that have are way more eloquent, way more well read.
Lol.
There are lots of people like that. Then I suddenly admit that, oh, actually, we're not all the same, and that's suddenly you've dispensed with moral relativism.
I wouldn't like I don't mean to define moral relativism that way. I didn't mean that when I was talking about moral relativism in the beginning. Um Really it's more in the sense because, if one series of morals fails, then others will just populate, because I don't believe that there's ever a moral vacuum. I think if we exist, we're producing morals as a byproduct of our existence, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm not saying that, oh, you can't make standards, because actually ultimately there are no standards. I think it's good to contrive standards. I typically try and be helpful to such people trying to contrive standards, because it's one way we can use to evolve. Because if there's no rules and it's just chaos, that's kind of like, I want to say the off. It's just darkness. It's just the womb. It's just potential. Like, can't. And I think a lot of times people are compelled because of the feeling of potential and possibility in complete chaos. But you'll never get anywhere. It's like a creative person is sitting in their room like, oh, I could make a 5 arc shonen, and it could be have all these pieces, but if you don't sit down and start drawing pictures, nothing gets realized. If you don't put lines down, you know, and then once something is realized, it is crystallized. It is, um, it maybe the word rules is incorrect for the metaphor, but there's some what's the word, uh precedent of the thing. Now you've made a precedent by simply by acting you've crystallized yourself as a being in the world, and so therefore a standard, a paradigm, or whatever has been created. That's more what I've been trying to convey with the term moral relativism. I don't have like the typical moral relativism, or I don't know even what the typical would be per se. But I decided to describe it as moral relativism because it's the most simple way. But I think the thing of true will, of that our will acts and it has consequences in the world, but the will is actually superior. The true will is actually superior to the morality. Like the inspiration is superior to the art. So I'm not saying that there's no standard. There should never be a standard. Mustn't ever be a standard. You know, um, at all, really. It's more that the standard is incidental almost, and that it is subject to change, that is mutable, that it is secondary to our own consciousnesses, which create these things that are essentially artifices materialized in the world. Okay.
Um, okay, so I think I addressed this with you yesterday. This is like the self-contradictory nature of moral relativism, which basically makes the claim that there are no absolute truths while making an absolute truth claim that there's no absolute truths. So it faces contradictions when claiming all moral perspectives are equally valid. They can't, especially when there's like so many more mutually exclusive individual moral perspectives, they can't all be true. The same way that not every person is a great person. Otherwise, we're all part of the herd, right? Like without there being a herd to distinguish the great people from, there would be it's a distinction that we need. So moral relativism would say, actually, no, all of you are herd, and you believe that you're a king, but you're really part of the herd, right? You're all herd people because none of you are great people. You're all just, there's no absolute truths, which is literally a truth claim. And it implies that a universal rule, that there are no universal rules. And it's it asserts things like tolerance for other perspectives, right? Like, oh, we have to tolerate other perspectives because there are no absolute truths, and we shouldn't just go around dismissing other people and dismissing other people's arguments because all moral perspectives are equally valid. So even people that you might just consider despicable, evil people that have done horrible things to other people, well, if it's just your perspective and everything that they do is equally morally valid, so you have no ground to stand on to condemn any person on moral grounds ever for any of their actions, no matter how heinous they are. And basically asserting that we have to have some type of tolerance as a universal norm for everybody, essentially. So it's like requiring us to tolerate like any action by anyone as long as like they can justify it based on a moral system they invented in their head. That's basically what Aleister Crowley was saying as well with the do without wealth thing,
So
right? It's kind of like a spiritual moral relativism, essentially. Like it's the herd mentality. And my point to you is that Aleister Crowley himself was a master and he was controlling the herd, and the herd are the people that follow him, right? So in order to become to own yourself, basically you have to step outside the herd. And Nietzsche said one of his most famous quotes that I like using all the time is the individual has always had the struggle to become overwhelmed by the struggle to become to keep from becoming overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. And I think that it's easy to adopt a moral relativist framework because it basically tells you that like that you don't have to apply standards or whatever, but is that not a standard in and of itself? Like an appeal to moral relativism is the definition of the herd. And I would say that the Homeric paradigm that Nietzsche was trying to go back to was because there is this desire to pull great men and women down from where they are. And it's like a crabs in the bucket kind of mentality that happens. And I don't genuinely think Nietzsche was actually genuinely interested in being a Satanist, which is misunderstood by so many people. I think in reality, what he was trying to do was he was trying to say, listen, there are some great people, some great men and women in history, and that there's a lot of people that try and tear those people down. And instead of tearing the great men and women down in history, we should attempt to help them. It's a radical idea of trying to help great people emerge. And instead of doing everything we can as a sheep mentality to push each other down and say, no, you're not allowed to be a great person because everyone else might be upset because their moral system disagrees with yours. Instead, you should dispense with all those people, right? And you should help attempt to create the great men and women and attempt to help those people emerge from society because we only have a couple of those people every generation, essentially, right? And you can almost see the beginnings of German idealism taking place, and idealism goes all the way back to Plato because he was the one that created this system. So even within this system, even though Nietzsche tries to dispense with Plato and Socrates, he has no choice but to be like hemmed in within their rhetorical linguistic framework within the philosophical landscape. And he was so aware of it as well. So even within my framework, I have no choice but to like be drawn back over and over again. That anyone that knows anything about Western philosophy, you're basically always making a kind of silent appeal to the Platonic authorities, essentially.
interesting. Yeah, as far as the you know, saying that there's no ultimate morality is an ultimate statement. I think that that's a little bit of a hobgoblin in the realm of can God create a rock that he could not lift type thing. I think it still works the whole thing. I mean, I'm not a hardcore moral relativist in the sense that like the way I would have learned about it in school or something, or on YouTube as well. Um, I don't believe that yeah, I don't believe that everything's relative in the sense that I can just in my mind, in my present mind, make a different decision about something, and then that is just valid for no reason. I don't believe that, no. It's the rules are mutable, but it takes a lot of effort to change them. Like getting away from the tribe and owning yourself. Yeah, you're defying the will of others, basically. You're like people call that evil eye in the esoteric or the especially new age spaces. Like do a spell and uh, return to sender basically. But I think it's the same sentiment being dealt with metaphysically of or with being dealt with basically magic is this idea that people are imposing their will on you to be basically a normie, and I think yeah we should be pushing people up to be great. um yeah, rising what is it? A rising tide raises all boats, something like that. That's what I think, and I think too many people spend their lives trying to cut each other down, but they're never going to get anywhere either. And some of the reason for that is karmic, and some of it's just practical. I mean, how do you get opportunities? By being of service. You know what I mean? So, to me, I see moral relativism as being actually more positive than saying like an ultimate morality. But I think even it's almost a moot point to say that, because what is the ultimate what is the ultimate morality? What is the ultimate truth? It's kind of like, it's the sun. You can't look at it, you can't know it, you can't exactly decide what it is. Almost like, what is God, I don't know, nobody knows. You can build stronger metaphors to know what is God, or whatever, but I would even say there perhaps is a very limited, and I mentioned this I think in the first argument, that there's perhaps a very limited ultimate morality anyways, that maybe God cares about a few things, but you know, or the gods or something. But I think the vast majority of things that we go through in our lives that are actually things we can personally affect is our will. And I would even say if me and three other people are out in a jungle, that's three people's will that's creating the scenario that we're all living in, right? So that's just two other, did I say two or three? Three other intelligences, I guess, that I am, having to base myself off of because I have a relationship with them. So also morality is almost, yeah, in relationship it creates something that is then referenced and whatnot. I'm saying that the phenomenon of what we call morality is different than what we would think, in the sense that it's not some static thing that we then appeal to, but that it's really just describing our relationship. So that's another side to sort of hit it from, um, as well. That's like a maybe another perspective I could give on it, but ultimately, yeah, I think that our will our true will in the high-minded sense, um, is even above what crystallizes then, um, you know. So yeah, okay.